let's talk about is sparring important, or is practicing alone important if you want to learn to be a good sword fighter. So the way I see it is that people, some people at least, they like to fight from the day one, and I have nothing against that really. It's super fun, it gets you going, and that's exactly how I started. So I didn't know pretty much nothing about sword fighting when I started, and there was no information, not around here at least. So we had this sports fencing and maybe some kendo. We had to look at some kendo books. There were some Japanese martial arts, so we had to look like, okay, what those guys are doing, and try to pick it up from there. But of course it was quite different than what we are doing right now here. So sparring, yeah, it gets you going really. But it works only in an environment where all your opponents are also equally good or equally bad, which way you want to say it. But it doesn't work very well if your training buddies are like high-level fighters. If you just go all out, you will get destroyed. And it's not gonna be fun, I can tell you. So I think I'm guilty of that myself. So when I was getting better and we had new guys, so we just threw them in the deep end of the pool and okay, let's start fighting, and you can strike like this and that, and then we went like that. But most of them quit, so only the people who were crazy enough stayed. So I wouldn't like to repeat that anymore. It's not the way to go, not the way to teach new people, unless they're the crazy ones. Of course. So that's how it looks like from the starting point. Then again, on the other hand, is this solo practice. If you're alone and if you are nobody to practice with, let's say you have just some kind of a book, sword and buckler manual, maybe 133 Walburg's Fechtbuch, and yeah, you're looking at the pictures and then you're trying to think in your head that what on earth are those guys doing in the book. Then you develop this kind of model that what they might be doing, and you start to believe in that. Yeah, that can work if you're like a genius sword fighter by nature, but the chances are you are not, and you end up like imprinting in your head techniques and ideas which are not going to work in a fight. And you have to de-learn those. I have done that many times myself, so I'm guilty of that as well, and I have like de-learned and relearned stuff. It's quite painful because once you have some mechanics, motorics in you down, you know, you repeat those many times and then you find that those are wrong. For example, by injuring yourself because you are doing something wrong, and only later you find out that this is not how it's supposed to go. So de-learning, it's going to be a difficult road. So I don't recommend that. So if you are practicing alone, try to find at least good information, or maybe somebody online or online videos, people who really know what they are doing. For example, some older fighters, not necessarily me, but who are still here, who have been fighting for 30 years, 35 years, full contact. They can still do it. So I'm not like anything really good or anything, but I'm still here. And while I have like injuries like wrist at the moment, those come and go, so I can heal and come back. So I know what I'm doing, but try to find people like that because they have the practical experience of fighting, at least sparring and practicing, and they can tell you a lot. Even if you just look at those videos, you will learn a lot. In contrast to trying to figure it out by yourself. It's too difficult. And even if you can do it, it's gonna take a lot of time. So just from my experience, trying to figure it out alone, 20 years of that, I learned more in 2 years with a good teacher. So it's 10 times faster. So it's really stupid not to take that path. So find somebody, take online course. Actually, we don't have online courses for these. Maybe I should make one, I don't know. But so that's that. That's like in the beginning. So what I actually recommend is that you take the solo practice on one hand and the sparring on one hand. So that if you generate some ideas on your own or see something online or some technique online, then you can go to sparring session with your training buddies or friends. I wouldn't recommend tournaments, but you can then try those ideas out. You get the feedback. What I see maybe some people do is that they generate a technique like this or that and then demonstrate it with some training partner who is basically standing in one place. So who is standing in one place in a fight? It can happen, like if you're on a shield wall and you can't move, but otherwise it's already a mistake to stand in one place if you can move. Movement is critical. It's like life and death. So try to avoid that. Always test your ideas, always test your findings, new techniques in free form sparring. So no choreography, no pre-agreed movements, attacks or defenses, only like the real stuff. And it doesn't matter if you execute it poorly, so if it doesn't seem to work, but it might be just you are like you haven't been practicing it enough. So just keep doing it, and if it has a chance to work, it will work eventually. So if you can do it once in a practice session, then I think it might work. But you also have to understand the context, not just the technique, but what was the tactical application and what the opponent was doing, so that you could pull this off. Usually there are like preconditions. You can't use any technique at any given situation. You have to be careful and select what you do. So that's like this hybrid or combination approach, and it's quite effective. You cycle this, you spar and practice alone and spar and practice alone. I do this a lot. So they both have their uses, I would say. But the combination is really powerful. If you spar only, like many people do, so they have maybe 3 favorite sparring techniques and then they use those and perfect those. That can work like really well if the only thing you like to do is spar or try to win fights within a certain rule set. You can optimize and select and optimize certain techniques for that, and you don't have to have many. Then you can just repeat and iterate those techniques alone, and then in sparring you can get like really good. But then your understanding will be this narrow, how to use the sword. If that's your idea, it's fine, I have nothing against that. But just want to say that there is the other possibility that maybe try to get a little bit wider understanding. because if your group is using a certain rule set, it might work really well in that group. For example, if you're striking, you're not allowed to strike to knee or below, could be one rule, and then you go later to some group that they will actually can strike your lower legs, and you have never learned how to parry low or evade those attacks, you're gonna be in a big trouble. So personally, my personal idea of practicing and fighting, I try to first of all find the original techniques what have been used, and the really old ones as far as I can find those, and usually the simple ones as well, and then I will be using those within any rule set I'm sparring under. So the only thing I have to do is maybe just drop off some techniques because the rules wouldn't allow, but I know how to do those already. I can parry really low if I want, I can disarm, but if those are not allowed by the rule set, I just won't do them. But I have those in my back pocket, because if I'm doing something else with the different group, then maybe I can use those. For example, with the shield, can you hit with the shield? Some groups don't allow that, but if you have your basic techniques down for sword and shield, you know how to hit with the shield, if that's allowed. It's also quite dangerous. Or you can modify the technique that you don't hit, but you kind of press. So for me, it's more interesting to use old techniques as far as the rule set allows. Okay, but what if you practice only alone and only occasionally maybe spar or go to tournaments? Can you get good? Yes, you can. I did discuss this before, and it's totally possible, but maybe you have to limit your fighting style to things that you can practice alone, so maybe longer range. So no wrestling, for example. How can you practice wrestling with yourself alone? It's going to be difficult. But if you are fighting from the long range, you can get quite good just by imagining your opponent, and occasionally maybe get a friend to throw you some shots, and look a lot of videos of other people fighting and then try to visualize those. You can get quite good. Meanwhile, always practicing your techniques. And if you want to spar only, that's a possibility. You can get quite good as well, but what I've noticed that of all the fighters I've known, if you're only sparring and if you're not doing solo practice, I mean meaningful solo practice, not just some kind of endurance runs that you are making a lot of strikes without any purpose, nothing like that, but kind of meaningful, learning new stuff. But if you're sparring only, people tend to reach some level, but then they stagnate. They get stuck to their favorite weapon combination or favorite techniques, and they stagnate. And they're quite happy with those because they work. But eventually, if they come out of their own group and meet other people, they're going to be surprised, because they don't have this wider repertoire of understanding how to sword fight. So I think it's really sad, because if your only point and purpose is you go to a practice session, if your only point there is to win as many fights as you can, I think it's a little bit sad. It should be a learning experience for you and your training buddies, so that everybody gets better little by little. This kind of enhancing practice style. But if you go there and only do what you always do, you are not learning. Well, maybe you're learning a little bit like application side of things, but are your friends learning? It's something to think about. But it's a choice. Just understand that only solo practice, only sparring, what's going to happen to you instead of combining and iterating. If you want to be really good, you have to do both, I think, in a systematic way. And it's going to be more fun to you and to everybody else, and you get a lot more out of this.